When the pregnant girl had shown up on Petra Drescher's doorstep that fateful day, she had given no name. If she had, it would have been Charlotte McGravin. When the girl was paid to have an abortion, she had taken the money and returned to her parents' home in Dublin, where she had given birth to a young boy, named him Charles, and then left him in the care of her parents to never return. Charlie would never really know his mother, but through what he was told of her by his grandparents, and he would never learn the identity of his father. He would love his grandparents, a rough, old Irish couple, dearly. They doted on him and spoiled him relentlessly, but they didn't have the energy of youth with which to combat his stubborn will. During much of his childhood, he was left to his own devices, and had to a certain point become known as something of a hellion. He was very intelligent, but could care less for his schoolwork. He was a fast talker, and could be quite charming, an attribute which would save him from imminent trouble, often. He was handsome, with wavy blonde hair and piercing gray eyes, although his grandparents and his mother were dark-haired and brown-eyed. He could only conjecture that he looked like his father, whoever that may have been. When he was 13 years old, he picked up a copy of Bram Stoker's Dracula and struggled through the elaborate phrasings and plot with semi-interest. It wasn't like the movies he had seen inspired by the novel. It was written as a collection of journal entries, a fact which he found to be tedious. However, after he had finished the book, he realized that certain ideas were lingering in his mind. So, wondering if maybe he hadn't missed something, he reread it much more carefully. The second time, it occurred to him that there was more to the story than he had originally thought. Dracula was not just some common run-of-the-mill vampire like he saw in the horror movies. Vlad had once been a man like any other, but in death had become something like a nightmare inhabiting flesh. The doomed nobleman did not exist within the set laws of the universe after his transition into undeath. It was as if there were a dark, other world which was pooling within the body of the vampire, and those who came into contact with him in turn were corrupted. Charlie had become particularly fascinated with the character of the lunatic vampire thrall, Renfield. Renfield had just been this average guy trying to do his thing and sell some property, and then all of a sudden, he had become the tool of this sadistic creature which had walked the earth for centuries. However, it was not just Renfield's personality which was so interesting, but his fixation. Renfield, by coming in contact with Dracula, had become consumed with the concept that life feeds life. And to Charlie, this seemed a strong and fundamental realization of how the universe functioned. Life feeds life. But the vampire was something outside of that circle. The vampire did not in truth feed on life, but actually sustained itself on death. The vampire was death, dreaming of life and sustaining itself on that darkness. Charlie, without realizing it, had begun to make a careful study of the cycles within the working mechanics of life and death. Unconsciously, he had created a detachment between himself and his fellow living human beings. He had, unwittingly, as if by some increasing deterioration or worsening psychological abnormality, began to observe the functioning of the human body in conjunction with the consciousness applied therein, as if it were purely an incidental state. The question, what is the end game? As human consciousness exists in a state of suspension, the body, which is given to them, is continuously damaged and worn by the passing of time. They choose those things which to care about and apply themselves to, and then watch as the energy which fueled their obsessions dwindles within the shell of a breaking, aging physicality and mind. Charlie could come to no rational solution, but somewhere in the concept of life within death, which he had discovered in Stoker's novel, he saw a glimpse of a hidden truth. By the time he reached young adulthood, He'd become markedly distracted by a pervasive and strong sexuality. However, the strange detachment would prove a fundamental obstacle in the development of relationships with women. People in general seemed to find his interests bizarre and impossible to fathom, and young women were no exception. He could attract girls with his charm and appearance, but he found himself constantly withholding his own observations and true thoughts in light of the inevitable negative reactions. More often than not, he found himself manipulating those girls who showed any desire for his companionship as a diversion before he grew weary of their presence and disregarded them completely. Still, he watched and took notice that life was feeding itself on life, and to a point he felt as if he were feeding on them. However, there was always someone who, despite his nature and attitudes, was drawn to him, and when he was 18, he met Elise. He had been sitting in the pub at a table by himself after he had finished his shift working at the dock. It was early summer. He had not even noticed that there was a girl at the bar watching him until she approached. She was a young, pretty thing, dressed in a collage of mismatched punk styles, with dyed black hair which matched her thick eyeliner and lip gloss. She was carrying a magazine in her hand, which she was glancing at as she stood by the table as if waiting his attention. He was reading a paperback of Stephen King's Salem's Lot, and did not look up even after she had seated herself across from him. "You look just like him," she said, breaking the silence. He now stared into the large, shining black eyes which were studying him with intense interest. "Who?" he asked. She laid the magazine on the table and pointed triumphantly at the cover page. "Him, Eric Drescher, the punk star." She said this with visible excitement. "Have you ever heard of a band called Necromance?" "No, I have not," he answered as he returned his eyes to his book. "They're very popular in Manchester. I'm from there." "I'm very happy for you." Undaunted by his sarcasm, she continued. "My parents just moved here to be close to my nan, but I've seen Necromance live. You could stand in for Drescher." She paused momentarily, awaiting a response, and then, when there was none, she began talking again. "You like that book?" "I've read it. I've read everything I could find about vampires." This caught his attention, but he showed nothing of it as his unchanging expression. "My favorite is Dracula, though. You can't beat it when it comes to vampires." "That's my favorite, too," he answered, as if it were a great effort to speak. "Really? Then we have something to talk about." Her tone was quiet and serious, as if she were making a proposal. "Come on," she said with sudden exasperation. "I've been in the city for a week, and there's no talk about anything interesting. I feel like a goddamn refugee from a sideshow." He gazed at her for several moments before placing the book face down on the table. "So, you like reading about vampires?" he said, smiling slightly. She seemed to melt with relief. "There's an American woman who wrote this book called Interview with a Vampire, and it's bloody brilliant." "I haven't read that one. I could lend it to you." She reached into her shoulder bag and produced a small golden paperback, which she slid across the table. "Do you like music?" she said as she reached for the book. "Some," he answered as he began thumbing through the pages. "Here," she said, rummaging again in the large bag and placing 4 cassettes between them. "They're like these. They're all mixtapes with bands like the Bauhaus and Susie and the Banshees and The Cure and Joy Division and Necromance. You ever heard of any of them?" "Yeah, some. But I don't know when I'll see you again to give them back." "Then just meet me here this time Friday. Maybe we can go see a movie. The Evil Dead 2's playing." "I've seen it twice, but I want to see this one called Angel Heart." "Brilliant. I'll see you Friday then. I'm Elise, by the way." "I'm Charlie. Good to meet you, Charlie." She then got up quickly and quietly left. Charlie stared at the tapes and the books with a certain amused annoyance. He had never been one to sit and listen to music. If he did, it was usually on the radio. That night he came home and ate dinner with his grandparents. He ate stew and listened to his grandfather grumble about some IRA bombing, and his grandmother ignored him as she read some book called The Commitments, distractedly chewing the edge of a half-burned piece of toast. "Good book, Gram?" Charlie asked, trying to divert the conversation at the table away from his grandfather's strongly anti-British political opinions. "These boys from Dublin start a soul band," she answered. "What kind of music is that, dear?" She was looking at him through her large reading glasses with wonder. It's American, I think," he responded, smiling. "Like James Brown." "Goodness! Why would some Irish boys want to play that?" "I don't know, Graham. I guess you'll just have to keep reading." She nodded her agreement and continued after taking another nibble of bread. "Well, get the doc going strong," his grandfather interjected. "Yeah, I like to be putting in some extra hours this week," Charlie said as he stood from the table and started towards his room. "Good. You need to stay busy." Charlie winced at the veiled reminder of his near arrest 2 weeks previous. He had gotten caught drunk and stumbling home from a party when he stopped to piss on a fence 2 blocks from the house. His grandfather had not been pleased to find the police halfway carrying Charlie up the front steps at 3 in the morning. He didn't respond to his grandfather's look, but instead went to his room and closed the door. He lay down and slid one of Elisa's mixtapes into his tape player and put on a pair of headphones as he opened the book she had given him. The music began with the slight clicking of guitar strings and then began to roll with a long, ominous bass line. As the guitar became a reoccurring, distorted chord of high-pitched, nervous chiming, a low voice began to sing about the actor Bela Lugosi. He immediately liked it. As he began to read the first chapter of the novel, he found that he liked it too. Soon the combination of the music and the words wove a strong, hypnotic spell over his mind. By the time the tape had stopped, he was certain that if the music and book were any indication of the girl's personality, he might be more than looking forward to seeing her again. By Thursday, he had finished Interview with the Vampire and listened to all the tapes several times. Despite himself, he was by then anxious to see the strange English girl. When she walked into the pub on Friday, he looked upon her with a new perspective. He had wondered if she truly was possessed of the same dark interests which he himself had harbored as a secret for so long, or if she was merely a member of some vampire fan fad occurring in England. As they set off walking for the cinema, he listened carefully to everything she said, trying to discern the depth of her understanding. There was one band on your tapes that really got to me," he said with a confessional tone. "Which one?" She was lighting a cigarette as she walked closely at his side, her arm brushing his as she shuffled absently along. Well, the music was a little more complex than the others, and the lyrics didn't really rhyme, except during the chorus. The guy singing kind of sounded like he was just reading over the music." "That's Necromance," she said, nudging him softly. "Drescher's a terrible singer, but his words should probably be published in books or something. It's like he's talking about ghosts and things, like they're real." "You don't believe in ghosts, then?" she said with a smile as she blew smoke from her small dark mouth, like she was kissing the night. I've never seen any," he answered truthfully. "Well, forget about the movie then. Let's go find some ghosts. What's a good cemetery?" We could take the bus to Donnybrook." "Is it old?" They don't get much older." The night was dark, and a heavy fog had settled over the street as they left the bus stop some 3 blocks away and made their way towards the entrance. "The gate'll be closed, but we can climb the wall." "Any cops around?" Elise said, smiling excitedly as he held her waist. She scrambled up the stone face. "Could be, but I doubt it." Once inside, her eyes were wide with wonder as they crossed through the dense collections of ancient markers and statues. "It was built around an old Celtic church," he commented as they walked under the great twisting trees which grew between the above-ground tombs and worn memorials. There's an old wall in here somewhere. That's all that's left of the church they built to replace it. Back in the 30s, they did some road work out front and found a mass grave from back in the day. That's bloody brilliant, she laughed as she grabbed his hand and held it as they wandered the stone benches on a path overgrown with grass and weeds. I've always heard that Dublin was founded by Vikings. Yeah, I guess so. Wouldn't surprise me. But I guess if you wanted to see a ghost, this would be the place. I don't think so, she said as she stopped and gazed at a massive eroded stone crucifix. Why is that? I just don't think that's how it all works. How does it work? He was watching her with intense scrutiny now as she touched the stone with her small white hand. I think if there are ghosts, then they're just about everywhere. I mean, really, death is as common as life when you think about it. So, what about heaven and hell and all that? He squatted beside her and stared at the now illegible inscription. Anything's possible, I guess, but really I think all the stories and myths we've created to comfort ourselves about dying don't really touch on the truth. Which is, well, man had this habit of taking everything simple and natural and trying to turn it into some kind of drama so that he doesn't feel like he's part of the nature of things. I mean, it's like sex. Look at all the rules, restrictions, and romance we've built around something that's really just an urge built into every animal. We take really basic events and magnify their significance so that we feel like when we do it, there is more meaning. We don't just eat, sleep, and fuck like all the other animals. It's all religion and gods when we do it. Let's face it, if you're hungry enough, all the rules go out the window or you die. People walk around obsessing over sex and turn it into some kind of mystical or evil experience when in truth, you don't screw, then the species dies. But all those rules and religion are necessary for society to function. Charlie was now sure he was speaking to someone who had given these matters a great deal of thought. Probably. Or maybe the truth is just so simple that people can't accept that they're a part of it. Maybe we just have so much free time now that we exaggerate every natural occurrence until the illusion of our importance just gets in the way, or what we're really supposed to be doing. Ha! And what's that? Living, enjoying, experiencing. That's why people like drugs so much. It shuts down the bullshit until you're just perceiving things for a while. Think about vampires, Charlie. A vampire is just a human for all whom all the bullshit has been removed. All basic animal functions have been relegated to one simple need: blood. A vampire is really little more than an immortal drug addict. Eternal life sounds great at first, but if you really study the literature, they'll find that most vampires consider themselves damned. Well, it doesn't seem to stop individuals from longing for that state now, does it? Of course not. That's the horrible confusion about the human condition. She was now standing by the cross, tracing the grooves delicately as she spoke. We hate pain, but pain is an essential part of life. We fear death, but it's the natural end of pain. Humans cannot make up their minds which they fear or want more. So, the natural conclusion is a life without pain or death, which is, we just established, damnation. The following Saturday, Charlie and Elise met up again, and this time did go and see the movie Angel Heart. Elise had leaned against his shoulder as he placed his arm around her without any undue awkwardness. She seemed to understand that he did not react emotionally to such displays of affection, and oddly seemed to take comfort in his detachment. Walking down the mostly empty street after the movie, she had taken his hand. "There's something you should understand about me, Charlie." What's that? By now, he had found that he was almost anxious to hear her comments on various things. "I don't really like sex." She looked at him without embarrassment. "I just thought you should know that. If you really wanted, we could do it, but I'm not particularly fond of it as an activity. I just thought I would tell you that in case case you had any hopes. That's alright. I pulled one off before I left the house. She laughed at that. What is it about it if you don't like exactly? It just seems very odd, sort of grotesque to me. For a while I thought maybe I liked girls, but really they're just as repulsive in their own ways. I just don't look at the human body and see it as something I'd like to roll around with. People in general are sweaty, smelly animals, expelling fluids and waste like water balloons with needle holes poked in them. So you don't ever get like a basic urge or anything? I do, but it's like getting hungry. I just like to grab a bite and be done with it. I'm not really one to sit down at a big dinner and stuff myself all night, if you know what I mean. Is that a problem? Charlie thought about it for a moment. No. I think I agree in a way. Sex is very distracting. My grandparents have been married for over 40 years, and from what I gather, they're quite pleased if it's over with, except for the occasional snack, as you put it. For them, it was like having children and all that. They talk about that part of it fondly, though. They had 5, and my mother was the youngest. That's what I mean. There's a part of me that thinks that carrying around a child and giving birth would be wonderful, but the thought of it, the physicality of it, is repulsive. That's why the urge for sex is so strong. There's got to be something powerful driving us to do it, or we might not reproduce like we do. Do you have the urge a lot? Oh yeah, this kind of seems like a game people play a lot of the time. I'd say a lot of girls feel like you do, but they're all wrapped up in the social aspect of it. I think about what you were saying in the cemetery last night, and I wonder if maybe we aren't just brainwashed into thinking that it's really more important than what it is. The world is getting to where everyone's trying to sell something, and the best way to do it is to stimulate people's appetites and convince them they need things they really don't. If you can convince people that they need something more than they really do, whether it's sex or food or drugs, then they'll buy things which they think will get them what they need. Girls buy expensive clothes, makeup and jewelry to attract men. And men buy cars and clothes and homes to attract women. At the end, it's all just so we don't have to be alone. That's the real irony, I think. We live in a world so full of bloody people that there's barely enough space to fit us all in. Yet people still walk around feeling alone and isolated, which in turn is just another illusion perpetuated to keep us trying to buy some love and companionship. It doesn't really make any sense, does it? It's like we're feeding off of each other. Like there's one group that's desperate to keep the other group lonely and lost, so they'll keep consuming all the worthless crap. Maybe the world got taken over by vampires a long time ago, and they're just keeping us as blind cattle, milling around in the shopping malls. Psychic cannibals. Say that again. The world has become populated by psychic cannibals, feeding off of each other's energy. It's like the Roman games, people feeding off of violence and sex and misery. Oh, that does sound grotesque. When you think about what we do to our celebrities, it makes a lot of sense. What do you mean? Well, if an actor is paid to make a movie, then the poor gobshite should just make the movie, then go home and be a puss face like everyone else. But we pay the wanker $1 million so that we can dissect his life and eat his soul. Pretty soon he's a header addict and dead in some hotel in Hollywood. So why is it that we seem to need that kind of sacrifice? Why do people have to feed off of each other in such ways, you know, if it so happens that vampires aren't running the world in secret? I think that there's a dark psychological undercurrent that we just don't understand. I think that all of it is there, unveiled, explanations within religion and art, but we don't just allow ourselves as a species to accept it as a reality. It has a lot to do with our need to define our identities, I'm certain. It's just like good and evil. One of the first steps in human development is that we need to begin separating actions by their relation to destruction and creation. At the same time, however, almost a given act of destruction can be redefined as a creative, if viewed from an alternative perspective, and vice versa. Look at the bloody Nazis. What do you mean? You ever watched The Twilight Zone? Oh yeah, I love that show. Ever seen the one where the scientist decides to travel back in time and assassinate Hitler? Ah, it's a classic. Right? Well, consider the implications if someone had actually just done that. They would save thousands of lives and stop World War II. Would they really? Do you realize how popular the concept of eugenics was during the 1930s and 40s worldwide? The idea of purifying the human bloodline of its weaknesses and corruptions was a growing movement amongst some of the greatest thinkers of the day. The biggest reason that these ideas were more or less abandoned was due to the realization of the lengths the Nazis had gone to in pursuing a similar ideology. If it hadn't been for the example of excessive horror set by them, then there's no telling how far the rest of the world may have went. Are you saying that the rest of us might have all gone as far as genocide? I'm saying that even though there are people who contemplate those same ideas, even in the shadow of the evil committed by the Third Reich, I'm saying that the World War II didn't end eugenics or racism, but it did manage to stifle them for a time. Take the war out of the equation. Imagine what might have happened if someone had been able to convince other world governments that such philosophies were good and not evil. Good and evil function as concepts of comparison. When you remove the extremes of one and have no examples by which to define the other, then the greatest of calamities occur. It's all about balance. Exactly. And humans are poor judges of weights and measures when it comes to the world of the immaterial. We've already established that one man's greatest fantasy is another man's damnation. Most people just run around trying to make a lot of money by any means possible. Do you ever think about the supernatural though, Charlie? Elise now had her arm wrapped around his as she gazed at the sidewalk. Oh, all the time. No, I mean really wonder about it. Like if there isn't more to all this than we've been talking about. Well, I did have a really strange thought one time, a long time ago, when I was younger. My gram was messing with some plant in the kitchen. Some kind of vine or something that people had grown in pots inside their houses. Sounds like a philodendron. Yeah, that's the one. Said she was cutting a piece off and put it in a jar full of water. And I asked why, and she says, the piece I cut off will grow into another plant if I put it in the water. That really struck me for some reason. I was thinking, what if people were like that? That is a weird thought. No, I mean, what if people were all like joined in this one life force that feeds us all like water to a plant? At some point, we all get cut off and we wither away and die. But what if you could just take them at that cut-off point and start feeding them with something else? Like some other kind of energy. What kind of energy? That's the question, isn't it? Because if you look at Dracula, it seems like he got caught at the point of dying, and then suddenly was filled with some dark negative energy, and it just sort of froze him in a certain place outside of the effects of time. It's like he's here, but at the same time he's not. It's like he's existing in some kind of bubble in reality. That's why everything around him's so weird and distorted. That's how he's controlling the wolves and affecting people's minds, you see. Once you get close enough to him, you're sort of being affected by this radiation he's giving off. You mean he's like a black hole inside of him? What? You know, when a star goes supernova, it can leave this black hole in space that just sucks everything in with its gravity and devours light and energy. Yeah, exactly like that. That's why he feeds on blood. Renfield is the one who really gives you the answer, because he's telling the doctor, hey, life feeds on life. Drinking blood is just a symbol for what he's really all about. What he's really feeding off of is life and energy. God, Charlie, you make it sound like it's really possible. That's what really gets me. It really does seem possible in a bizarre sort of way. It's like Bram Stoker and all these blokes are talking about something that's real, but in a way that keeps it all a secret. Even Marlowe from Salem's Lot seems to be existing in between two worlds. Sheridan Le Fanu's Carmilla is like a creature from some other world that's living inside the body of this girl. Okay, that's enough. Let's go find a place to shag. I thought you didn't like sex. I don't, but, you know, just what to say to get me in the mood. You're a weird bird, Elise. A month passed, with Charlie and Elise growing ever closer. Neither attempted to define their relationship beyond anything more than friendship, but it had begun to occur to Charlie that he was a good deal happier with her presence in his life. He had realized early on that he did not feel any sense of superiority or control over the girl. She was not smitten with him, and in fact, he felt that if he were to betray her trust, he would probably never see her again. She demanded an absolute honesty from him, which, if clouded, would ultimately bring about the end of their friendship. She was acutely aware of his manipulative nature, but allowed him the opportunity to overcome it. He did not believe in the concept of love as a binding universal force which brought souls together. But on a very practical level, he knew that he was more than willing to go to great lengths to continue his companionship with Elise. She had awakened a peculiar set of principles and traits ingrained in him by his grandparents, which had up until then sublimated, if not outright discarded. He liked her, he respected her, and desired to keep her close and protect her. The question became, how could he keep her? Yeah, probably wouldn't ever get married, would you? He said one day as they lay beneath a tree on blankets at Phoenix Park, watching the deer graze over a wide, mist-covered grove. She looked off at the dim gray silhouette of the Wellington Testimonial Monument through the fog with distant, dark eyes. What's the point? She said, looking at him with solemn curiosity. Oh, we could be together. We're together right now. Yeah, but, we could get a place. Leave our folks behind. Good Lord, Charlie. You want to own me? She laughed and lifted the bottle of wine to her black-stained lips. Yeah, I do, he answered bluntly. It's a basic male impulse. I like you, and I don't want to lose you. So, I'd like to make a bid. It's not like I'm seeing anyone else. You're the only bloke I've met so far in Dublin who I can talk to. It's a big city. You might find another if I don't get a contract. You're bloody mad. I've got a ring. He reached in his leather coat and brought out a small black box, which he held invitingly in his palm. You're mental? If I marry you, then my dad throws me out and I have to get a job. That's true, but no, I have to start working someday anyway. I put it off. I could live at home for years and never have to work. If I marry you, I'll be serving chips and lager in the pub next week. Put that thing away and stop being a shit. That's fine. The offer stands. She looked at him disgustedly for a moment before finally smiling and brushing a strand of blonde hair back from his forehead. You know, if I was looking to get bought like a fat farm cow, then you're the only one I'd want buying me. I'd always warm my hands before I milked you. God, you a pig. She leaned forward and kissed him softly. I'm your pig, though, you know. I know, Joe. I know. Charlie sat at their usual booth at the pub. He looked up from his pint and gazed once again at the clock on the wall. Elise was now an hour late, and he was beginning to feel a dull knot of worry tightening in his stomach. He was not accustomed to the feeling, and it made him feel weak and pathetic to be so concerned over someone's welfare. It was so rare a thing for her not to be on time for a date, however, that he began to wonder exactly how he could check on her whereabouts. He had her phone number, but he knew better than to call at any time when her parents might answer. The well-off English couple did not take warmly to the rough Irishman their daughter had developed such an undesirable liking to. He almost sighed audibly with relief when he saw her enter smiling and looking slightly edgy as she threw her bag down beside him and slumped into the booth, kissing his cheek. I was beginning to wonder if I should go looking, he joked as she took several deep swallows from his glass before grabbing his arm with mock desperation. I never thought they were going to let me out, she said, exasperated as she rummaged through her bag for cigarettes. What happened? He asked. She straightened a crumpled fag and lit it quickly. Bloody IRA, that's what happened, she answered. And he saw that her hands were nervously shaky. What are you on about? Well, you know my old man's a justice of the peace, right? Yeah, what of it? You know, a couple of weeks ago, when that Brit soldier got into it with that bunch of Irish fellas down on the square? Yeah, my grandfather's been on about it all week. Said the soldier drew his piece and ended up shooting some kid playing on the sidewalk. That's right. And my dad's the judge over the trial. This morning he got a phone call saying he better watch his back if he lets that soldier off easy. So he's had me and Mum on lockdown. I'd hate to agree with your dad, at least, but you don't want to make any chances with them. They're a dangerous lot. Listen to you. You sound like a worried old woman. It's no joke. They take this shit very seriously. If they had their way, they'd see all the British packing. I don't get it. It's the bloody 80s. I mean, shit. English, Irish, it's all one country, more or less, right? Hardly. The IRA's been knocking off the English for a long time now, and they're not about to stop anytime soon. They see the British as an occupying force. They see themselves as freedom fighters, and they think the British have been treating the Irish like dogs since before the last century. Put down your books, take off your headsets, and watch the news every once in a while. You'd be a little bit more concerned about a call from the IRA, at least. Now you sound like my old man. Yeah, I know. But I hear all about this shit every night over dinner. My granddad isn't very fond of the English either, but he thinks the IRA are a bunch of terrorists. It's all tit for tat with them. The Brits lock up some of their guys, so they set off a briefcase bomb. It just goes on and on. I just want you to be safe. You're turning into a regular sweetheart, Charlie. She laid her head on his shoulder and took another sip from his pint. Don't worry. I'm sure it'll be alright. Maybe I should just stay with you and lie low for a while. We can't stay at my place. My folks wouldn't shine to that. Got any cash for a hotel? Yeah, I could do that. It was easy enough for them to find a cheap, out-of-the-way hotel. They bought a bag of groceries and wine before renting a stack of movies and locking themselves in for the night. Elise made an awkwardly intense phone call to her parents, during which she explained that she would be staying with friends for a few days. Her father had been livid and demanded that she return home. She had calmly told him that she loved him, but that she felt uncomfortable at the house under the police watch. After she had hung up, she stood for a moment looking out the window over the street. It's like I'm abandoning them, she said, as Charlie sifted through the VHS tapes and inspected a copy of Hello, Mary Lou, Prom Night 2. I mean, here I am holed up, getting ready to watch movies and shag for who knows how long, and they're at home worrying themselves sick. You could just go home, Elise, Charlie said as he read the back of the cardboard case. They are your family. I would understand. He glanced over the titles. Puppet Master, Basket Case, and From Beyond with growing enthusiasm. I know, it's really selfish of me, but I just want to be with you, Charlie. Sometimes I think about what you said at the park, and I wonder if maybe that's not exactly what I should do. My folks want me to go back to England and start college, but I'm not sure I can leave you. I could move to England, he answered calmly. It's not like I have to stay here. I could find a job down there, pay for a place while you went to school. You're serious? It's not like I have big plans or anything. I just work and do my thing. I could do the same in England. You're the only person that's really very important to me besides my grandparents. And I think they kind of want me out of my way. All I'm saying is that if you want me around, then I can be there. I think that really makes me happy. Good to hear it. Now, which one of these should we watch first? You're such an oddball, Charlie. Takes one to know one. The next few days passed in a dreamlike haze of laughter, sex, and wine, accented by their ongoing analysis of the movies and any philosophical underpinnings they might notice. Charlie called in sick to his job, and the outside world was for a time forgotten. It was early on a Thursday morning when Elise switched on the news and saw that the trial was over. They stared blankly at the television as they heard the reporter announce that the British soldier had been acquitted of all charges. There were shouts and demands issued from the crowd outside on the courthouse. I think I better go home now, Charlie, Elise said quietly. But why? It'll be more dangerous now than ever. I know that, but I have to be with my parents. I can't just hide out here with you and pretend like nothing's happening, like a shit. Yeah, I understand. Do you? You know that I'd rather stay here with you, right? You can't just ditch your folks. I just wish they were safer. I'll be alright. You need to go back to work anyway. Besides, your folks will be worried. Oh, probably enjoyed the break. I drive them batty most of the time. I'll give you a call tonight and let you know how things are going. They'd said their goodbyes and parted ways at the bus stop. Charlie returned home to find his grandmother angry and frantic at his disappearance and his grandfather scowling from his large recliner in the TV room. I told ya he'd be back, he shouted over a boxing match. You're shacked up with some bird, weren't ya? The old man stated without humor. Hoped you had the good sense to wear rubber. Oh, Miles, must you be such a pig? His grandmother retorted as she eyed Charlie suspiciously. Leaning in and hugging him, she whispered, You did use protection, didn't you? What do you think, Ram? Charlie sighed as he rifled through the fridge and withdrew a carton of orange juice. Oh, that's a good boy now, Charles. Is she a girlfriend or another one you picked up at the pub? I met her at the pub, but she was my girl, if that's what you mean. Is she a good one, then? She said as she poured tea and sat down at the table with a cup and saucer. She's about the best I've ever met. Between you and me, Graham, I asked her to marry. Oh, Charlie. Oh, you're such a fool. You're barely out of nappies. She turned me down. Well, I would say I'm sorry for you, but I'm glad you not be throwing your life away so quick. Would it be throwing my life away? If I really loved her? His grandma looked as if she'd been hit by a board. Oh, Charlie. I've never heard you talk like that before. I've never really felt like this before. It's not exactly like some head over heels kind of thing, though. He sat down and filled a plastic cup with juice as he looked into his grandmother's shining, interested eyes. Then what is it, then? She asked inquisitively as she sipped from her cup. It's like when you go out to the store, and even though you weren't planning on buying anything, you see something that you never thought you could have. So you're so afraid that if you don't get at it, then someone else will snatch it up if you wait. God, you're a strange one, lad. But I guess if that's what you call love, then that's what it is. I don't know what else to call it. I don't think I've ever met anyone like her again. If I let her get away, then that's it. I don't know for sure, but probably wouldn't ever think of anyone else the same way. So what you going to do? I'll just try and best not to lose her, I suppose. Well, good luck then. Just try to find it in mind that love is doing what's best for someone else, even when it means giving up things for yourself. Charlie looked at her and realized that he would never be as strong, wise, and good as either of his grandparents. Although far from perfect, he felt that both should be eligible for sainthood by virtue of their warm hearts and wisdom alone. It was just then that they heard a sudden thump in front of the room. Charlie leapt up and looked through the doorway to find his grandfather sprawled on the floor unconscious. He ran to the old man's side as he heard his grandmother call out behind him. He quickly lifted the old man's bald head carefully in his hands as he pressed his fingers to his grandfather's throat to feel for a pulse which was present, but weak. He noticed a strange twitching movement at his temple and yelled to his gran, "Call an ambulance!" "Oh, Charlie, is it a stroke?" she said in tears as she frantically grabbed the phone and began rolling the numbers on the rotary dial. "I think so, Graham," he answered, as his grandfather's eyes opened briefly and met his gaze before closing again. As he waited for the ambulance, he held his grandfather's cold, damp hand and felt the weight in his arms go heavy and limp. Before he even heard sirens on the street, he could see that the old man's chest was no longer rising with breath. They arrived only in time to pronounce his grandfather dead. Charlie sat at the hospital bed with his arms wrapped around his weeping grandmother and felt the excited detachment of adrenaline sinking into an abyss of grief. His heart was pounding rhythmically as he began to cry, and he wondered how it could even be possible that this horror had occurred so quickly. He hadn't even had time to go in and sit down to watch the match with the old man as he had planned to do. Just a few minutes to tell him that he was sorry for leaving the way he had. He was gone. The man who had taught him everything he ever knew about being a decent, responsible person. He felt a sickness growing inside of him. And this illness would not be cured in the coming hours, or days, or weeks. The doctors had given his grandmother some pills to calm her, and far into the night, after endless grieving and weeping, she had slept. Charlie sat alone in the kitchen drinking whiskey from his grandpa's tumbler. Sometime around midnight the phone had rang, and it was Elise. She apologized for calling late, but he stopped her midway through her apology as he burst into tears and told her what had happened. He heard her begin to cry on the other end of the line as she said that she would come to him. "They don't even know where I live," he said morosely. "Besides, it's too late. You'll just get in trouble. Stay home. Come out tomorrow if you can. I'll feel better knowing you're safe." She stayed on the phone and they talked numbly for a half hour as he explained that doctors didn't know exactly what had happened yet, but that he had probably just had a massive stroke. His grandfather was 76, and these things just had a way of happening out of the blue sometimes. She said that she wished she could be there with him, and he agreed that he did as well. He felt as if by now, any worse nightmare was possible. If his grandfather could die in one brief moment, then anyone was liable to pass at any time. If something were to happen to his grandmother, that he would be alone and so lost. "You have me, Charlie." Her words were silent and profound. "We should get married, you know. Do you still have that ring?" "I do, but you shouldn't be marrying me out of pity." "It's not. I've been thinking it over. With all this RA shit around here, I begin to think maybe I really just want to be with you. My folks are on about sending me back to England to stay with my aunt." Charlie felt his chest tighten and his stomach fill with hot, molten lead of panic. "Maybe it would be for the best," he said, remembering his grandmother's words. "You'd be safe there." "I'd be as good as dead without you. If I leave, you've got to go with me." "Can't leave my gram. She needs me now. I'm all she's got." "Then I'll just have to stay." Charlie heard someone speaking in the background, and Elise told someone to piss off. "It's my mom. She wants me to go to bed." "You shouldn't be shitty to her, Elise. You'll regret it." "I know. You're right. I'll tell her I'm sorry." "Go to bed. I'll be alright." "Okay. I love you, Charlie." "I love you too." They both hung up and Charlie took the bottle with him to his bedroom. He lay in bed drinking until the room was spinning around him and he hovered on the edge of blacking out. As his eyes began to close, he heard a noise outside his window and, forcing his eyes open for a few moments longer, stared at the pulled curtains lit by the lamps from the street outside. As he began to slip into the darkness of slumber, he thought he could see a shadow moving over the glass outside. He thought to himself that it might be a tree branch or bird. It seemed oddly shaped and moving strangely. He could stay conscious no longer, and sleep took him. It would be a long week ahead of him.